Before the accident, the billionaire's life was one that many people only dream of. He lived in a grand mansion on a hill, overlooking the city that never slept. Every morning, he would wake up to the soft light of the sunrise filtering through massive windows, the view of the bustling streets far below a constant reminder of the empire he had built. His days were filled with business meetings, lavish dinners, and trips around the world. Everything he touched seemed to grow, from companies to investments to luxurious properties, and people admired him for his sharp mind, his success, and his unshakable confidence. But despite all the money, the fame, and the power, there was a hidden side of him that almost no one saw. In private, he was a man who carried a quiet restlessness, a sense that something was missing despite having everything. He had few close friends because he trusted very little. People around him often stayed at a polite distance, admiring the man but never really knowing him. He had assistants, drivers, and advisors who handled every detail of his life, yet he felt an emptiness that no amount of wealth could fill. He remembered the days when life was simpler, when laughter came freely, and human connection mattered more than deals or profits. But those days seemed distant now, replaced by meetings, contracts, and schedules. Even the people closest to him sometimes felt like strangers because they were part of a world built on convenience rather than genuine connection. The billionaire had always been ambitious, but that ambition came with a cost. He pushed himself relentlessly, working long hours, making decisions that could make or break industries, and rarely allowing himself a moment to rest. Sleep was often interrupted by late-night emails, and meals were sometimes forgotten in the rush of his schedule. He knew how to win, how to convince, how to inspire. Yet he often wondered if winning in business meant losing something far more important, the warmth of human companionship and the simple joys of life. His life, though perfect on paper, had become mechanical, each day repeating the same patterns of work, judgment, and isolation. Despite all this, he enjoyed the finer things in life, from his private collection of exotic cars to his rare art pieces that lined the walls of his mansion. He surrounded himself with beauty. His evenings were spent dining on exquisite meals prepared by world-class chefs or attending glamorous parties with the elite of society. On social media and in the press, he was portrayed as untouchable, the man who had it all, admired, envied, and sometimes feared, but deep down, he longed for something that money could not buy, a spark that would make life feel alive again, something or someone to remind him that the world could still hold surprises. Then came the accident that changed everything. It was sudden, unexpected, and utterly life-altering. One moment, he was on top of the world, and the next, he found himself confined to a wheelchair, dependent on others for even the simplest of tasks. The billionaire who had controlled so much now felt powerless. His body, once strong and agile, refused to obey him, and the sense of control he had relied upon crumbled. He had built his empire with his hands and mind, yet now he struggled to feed himself, to walk, to live in the way he once had. The mansion that had once felt like a fortress of freedom suddenly became a cage, the walls surrounding him a constant reminder of what he had lost. At first, he was angry, furious at the world for the unfairness of it all. The doctors offered their advice, therapists provided their guidance, but no words could erase the frustration and despair that filled his mind. He tried to push through, attempting exercises, therapy, and new routines, but progress was slow and painful. Every day a struggle between hope and hopelessness. Friends and business associates visited occasionally, offering polite encouragement, but many could not handle the sight of a man who had once been untouchable now so vulnerable. The billionaire realized that while money could solve many problems, it could not heal him, it could not make him whole. Loneliness settled in like a shadow. Even with assistants, staff, and medical professionals around him, he felt isolated, trapped in a life that he had never imagined for himself. The world outside continued at its usual pace, but inside the mansion, time seemed to move differently, slower, heavier, each day blending into the next. He began to question the meaning of success, wondering if all the wealth, power, and achievements had been worth the cost of personal happiness and freedom. And yet, despite the darkness, a small part of him refused to give up. A flicker of curiosity, a faint hope, remained, hinting that perhaps something extraordinary could still happen, that life could still surprise him in ways he had never expected. The day had begun like any other in the billionaire's mansion, with sunlight spilling across polished marble floors and the faint hum of the city far below. But this day was far from ordinary, though he did not yet know it. He was moving slowly from one room to another, the weight of his disability pressing down on him in a way that made even simple tasks exhausting. Each corner of the mansion reminded him of what he had lost: the freedom to move, to live without assistance, to control his own body. As he wheeled himself into the main hall, he noticed something unusual: a small figure standing at the far end, almost blending in with the shadows. She was young, no older than 16 or 17, with dark, shining eyes and an air of quiet confidence. Unlike anyone who had ever visited him before, she didn't bow, flinch, or appear intimidated. She simply stared at him with a calm intensity that made him pause. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice tinged with suspicion, though curiosity sparked beneath. The girl didn't answer immediately, only held out a small vial, filled with a liquid that shimmered in the morning light. "I came to help," she said finally, her voice steady. "I have something that can change everything for you." The billionaire raised an eyebrow, skeptical, thinking of the countless people who had tried to impress, manipulate, or scam him over the years. He had never met anyone quite like this, someone so young, yet so certain of themselves, someone who seemed to carry a calm authority that did not demand respect but commanded it naturally. He studied the vial in her hand, noticing the liquid's unusual glow, almost as if it had a life of its own. "This is some kind of trick," he said cautiously, though part of him hoped it wasn't. The girl shook her head, smiling faintly. "No trick. This is real, but it requires trust," she replied, stepping closer, her movements deliberate and careful. He hesitated, glancing around at the staff and assistants who were frozen in quiet confusion at the unexpected visitor. Some whispered, others gawked, unsure whether to intervene, but the billionaire felt a strange pull, a sense that this moment was unlike anything he had ever experienced, that perhaps, despite all reason and logic, something extraordinary was about to happen. He took a deep breath, his mind racing, remembering all the therapy sessions, the endless routines, the slow progress he had made over months. He had faced pain, frustration, and hopelessness, yet something about this girl, about her confidence and the mysterious fluid, sparked a flicker of hope he thought he had lost. "All right," he said finally, his voice firmer than he expected. "Show me what you mean." The girl nodded once, as if she had been waiting for this moment, and carefully positioned herself beside him. As she uncorked the vial, the air seemed to change, filled with a faint shimmer of light and warmth. The liquid inside glowed softly, catching reflections from the chandelier above. She raised it carefully, and the billionaire felt a strange energy, almost magnetic, drawing him forward. He watched in silent anticipation, unsure whether to trust this moment or retreat into caution, but curiosity won, and he allowed her to proceed. When the girl finally sprayed the fluid toward him, a soft mist hung in the air, sparkling like tiny stars suspended in sunlight. The billionaire felt it first as a tingling warmth on his skin, subtle at first, then spreading quickly through his arms, chest, and legs. Muscles he had not felt in months responded involuntarily, tiny twitches and movements that startled him. His heart pounded in disbelief as the impossible seemed to stir before his eyes. The staff gasped, some moving closer, others holding back, unable to understand the miracle unfolding before them. He leaned back slightly, trying to comprehend what was happening. How is this possible?" he whispered, his voice trembling. The girl only smiled, as if the answer was simple and obvious. "Sometimes, the impossible is only waiting for someone brave enough to believe," she said. Her words struck him deeply, cutting through the years of despair and skepticism, stirring something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, raw and undeniable. He realized that life could still surprise him, that even after all he had lost, change was possible, and perhaps a miracle had chosen him. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of excitement, a spark of life beyond the routine pain and struggle. He didn't yet know what the full impact would be, but he knew that nothing would ever be ordinary again, that this day, seemingly normal at first glance, would mark the beginning of something extraordinary, something that would challenge everything he thought he knew about life, strength, and possibility. And in that moment, as the shimmering mist settled in the air, he understood that he was standing on the edge of a transformation he could never have imagined. The young girl stepped closer, holding the small vial carefully in her hands. Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of determination and something the billionaire could not quite place, like she carried a secret the world was not ready to know. He watched her with skepticism, unsure if this was some trick or a real chance at the impossible. The fluid inside the vial shimmered slightly, catching the light in a way that made it look almost alive. It wasn't like any ordinary liquid he had seen before. It seemed to hum with energy, as if it had a will of its own. "Trust me," the girl said softly, her voice calm but firm, "this will change everything, but only if you let it." The billionaire hesitated, thinking of the countless scams and schemes he had encountered in his life, yet something in her eyes, something in the way she carried herself, made him pause. He realized that he had nothing left to lose, and maybe, just maybe, this was his chance at a miracle. When she finally sprayed the fluid, the room seemed to change. The air itself shimmered slightly, warm and alive, and a strange calm filled the space. The billionaire felt it first in his chest, a gentle warmth that spread through his body, tingling in places he had thought would never feel again. His muscles, stiff and unyielding for years, responded in ways that surprised him. Even his fingers twitched involuntarily, bending and stretching as if remembering movements long forgotten. The staff who were watching gasped, some stepping back in disbelief, others whispered quietly, unsure of what they were seeing. The billionaire looked down at his legs, shocked to see subtle movements, tiny shifts, but enough to make him feel hope. It was as if the fluid had awakened something that medicine, therapy, and even time could not. The impossible, the miraculous, had begun, and no one could deny it. He tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but words failed him. His mind raced with questions, yet there was also a strange peace, a trust forming in his heart that this was real, not magic, not trickery, but something extraordinary beyond explanation, something that made him feel alive again for the first time in years. The girl smiled faintly, almost knowingly, as if she had seen this reaction countless times before. Yet the billionaire felt it was all unique to him. For the first time since the accident, he realized that miracles might exist. He felt a spark of hope that he had almost forgotten, that despite all the despair and helplessness, life still held surprises, and that perhaps, just perhaps, he could walk again, not just in body, but in spirit. The mysterious fluid had done more than touch his body. It touched his mind, his soul, and reminded him that the impossible might not be impossible after all. As the glow from the fluid faded slowly, the billionaire sat in awe, trying to process what had just happened. Every nerve, every muscle seemed more alive than before, and for the first time, he felt the stirring of possibility. The girl quietly stepped back, her mission seemingly complete, leaving him to feel the magnitude of the moment, and in that silence, he knew that life would never be the same again, that the impossible had begun, and nothing would ever be ordinary from this moment forward. The moment the mysterious fluid settled in the air, the room fell into a stunned silence. As the billionaire tried to move, he noticed subtle shifts in his body, his fingers twitching, his toes flexing slightly, movements he had not felt in years. For a long second, disbelief froze everyone present. The assistants and staff stared, mouths slightly open, unsure whether to speak, scream, or run for help. Some rushed forward, tentative hands hovering near him, afraid to make a wrong move, while others simply froze, unable to comprehend the impossible scene unfolding before their eyes. The billionaire's heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of fear and excitement washing over him. He looked down at his hands, wiggling fingers that had long been still. Every tiny motion felt miraculous, a reminder that hope could exist even in the darkest corners of life. He tried to lift one arm, then the other, and to his amazement, they obeyed him, albeit slowly, awkwardly, but they obeyed nonetheless. This can't be real," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. It's impossible." His words barely left his lips when the young girl gave a reassuring smile, as if she had known from the very beginning that this moment would come. The room was filled with gasps, whispered words, and the low hum of disbelief. Nurses and therapists who had been working with him for months stepped closer, eyes wide with astonishment. Some whispered prayers under their breath, unable to contain the awe they felt. The billionaire's body, once unyielding and unresponsive, now answered his commands in small, careful steps, each movement a testament to the fluid's mysterious power. Tears formed in his eyes as he slowly realized that the impossible had begun, that something he had long given up hope for was happening right in front of him. His emotions were overwhelming, a flood of relief, joy, and gratitude. He wanted to laugh, to cry, to shout, all at once, but words seemed insufficient. The room, once filled with polite observation and cautious assistance, now vibrated with excitement. Each person present sensed the magnitude of what they were witnessing. It was not just a recovery of movement, it was the awakening of life itself. A reminder that miracles could happen when least expected. The billionaire's assistant stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, are you?" He nodded slowly, unable to finish his sentence, overwhelmed by the sight of his boss moving again, even in small ways. His body responded to commands, first fingers, then arms, then legs, the tiniest hints of power returning as if awakened from a long slumber. The young girl watched quietly, serene, confident, as though she knew this transformation was inevitable, and the room seemed to hold its collective breath, each second stretching with anticipation. He tried to speak, words catching in his throat. I can feel it. I'm moving," he stammered, each word shaking with disbelief. Those around him began to realize that this was no illusion, no trick. The billionaire who had been confined to a wheelchair, who had battled months of frustration, pain, and helplessness, was beginning to reclaim control of his body. Every tiny twitch, every cautious movement of a finger or toe, felt monumental, more significant than any financial deal, more powerful than any business achievement. It was pure life asserting itself in the face of despair. As the moments passed, his movements became more confident, the initial tremors replaced with stronger control. Though still tentative, every motion brought new hope, not only for him but for everyone present. Friends and staff who had once feared his despair now found themselves inspired by his transformation. The billionaire, usually reserved and composed, now allowed himself a rare smile, a mixture of astonishment and gratitude. His eyes met the girl's, and in that silent exchange, he conveyed everything he felt. The impossible had touched him, and he knew life would never be the same again. By the time the staff regained their composure, the room was buzzing with cautious excitement. Phones were raised, whispers turned into conversations, but all eyes remained on the billionaire, who continued to test the limits of his renewed abilities. Each small success, every movement, felt like a victory, a triumph over months of despair, and for the first time since his accident, he dared to believe that recovery, real, lasting recovery, might be possible. The room had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would be remembered for years, a moment where hope had transformed impossibility into reality. After the initial shock had settled, the billionaire felt a new, strange determination rising within him. For the first time in years, he could feel his legs responding, tiny at first, then stronger, like muscles awakening from a deep, long sleep. The room, once heavy with disbelief, now held a quiet, expectant tension, everyone sensing that something remarkable was about to unfold. He gripped the arms of his wheelchair, his hands trembling slightly, the strength in his fingers returning as if the mysterious fluid had touched not just his body but his very spirit. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a brief moment, and then slowly, carefully, he shifted his weight forward. The muscles in his legs, stiff and uncooperative for so long, began to cooperate, albeit hesitantly. He felt a rush of emotion, a mix of fear, excitement, and disbelief, every nerve alert, every sense heightened. He was about to attempt something he hadn't done in years, stand on his own 2 feet. The young girl remained nearby, her calm presence a steady anchor in the whirlwind of sensations, as if she were silently saying, "You can do this," without uttering a word. Slowly, inch by inch, he pushed himself upward, his legs wobbling under his weight, muscles trembling with the unfamiliar task. Every tiny movement required focus, courage, and faith, yet there was also exhilaration in the effort, a sensation he had almost forgotten. Freedom. Even the assistants who had supported him for months were in awe, barely daring to breathe as they watched the billionaire rise. Each second seemed to stretch into eternity, the quiet room punctuated only by the soft sounds of shifting weight and the subtle hum of energy in the air. His legs wobbled, threatening to buckle, but he steadied himself, gripping nearby furniture for support. The sensation was overwhelming, a mixture of relief and pure, uncontainable joy. His heart raced as he realized that he was truly standing, not just leaning, not just balancing for a moment, but fully upright. A triumphant smile spread across his face, tears threatening to spill as the impossible became real. something that had once been only a dream or a fantasy. The young girl stepped a little closer, encouraging without words, and he took a tentative step forward, then another, his legs slowly learning the rhythm again, muscles remembering movements long forgotten. Each step was tentative, uncertain, but also triumphant, a declaration that he would not be confined by the limits of the past. The assistants offered quiet words of encouragement, holding their hands nearby in case he faltered, but he moved with increasing confidence, each motion proving that miracles could happen, that determination and faith could spark the impossible into life. He paused, catching his breath, looking down at his legs in awe, and then smiled at the girl, who simply nodded, her eyes reflecting pride and quiet satisfaction. The billionaire's mind raced with emotions. He remembered all the months of struggle, the frustration, the therapy sessions that had seemed to go nowhere, and now, in a single moment, he felt the culmination of hope, perseverance, and the mysterious intervention of someone who had believed in him. With each step, he grew stronger, more confident, until he could move across the room without support. The mansion, once a cage, now felt alive around him, filled with movement, possibility, and a sense of freedom he had not known in years. Every person present could feel the electricity in the air, the joy and awe that accompanies witnessing a miracle. It was not just physical recovery, it was the reclaiming of life, a restoration of dignity, and a spark of hope that no one could ignore. For the billionaire, every step was a reminder that nothing in life was permanent, that despair could be overcome, and that even in the darkest moments, extraordinary change was possible. He looked at the young girl, wanting to thank her, but words felt insufficient. His smile, radiant and tearful, said more than language ever could. She had given him not just movement, but the courage to believe again, and in that room, filled with astonishment and wonder, he realized that life could still surprise him, that the impossible was no longer impossible. By the time he had taken several steps unassisted, the atmosphere in the room had shifted completely, from disbelief to amazement, from fear to hope. The billionaire stood tall, proud, and fully aware that this day would be remembered forever, not for the wealth he possessed, but for the miracle that had transformed him from helplessness to mobility, from despair to hope. From that moment on, the first steps were not just movements, they were a declaration, a celebration of life, and proof that sometimes, miracles really do happen when you least expect them. Word of the billionaire's miraculous recovery spread faster than anyone could have imagined. It started quietly, a few whispers among the staff and close friends, but within hours, the story had grown into something extraordinary. The news leaked online, social media exploded with posts, videos, and speculation. Everyone wanted to know, how could a man who had been disabled for months suddenly regain mobility? The tale was unbelievable, yet witnesses insisted it had happened exactly as described. The mysterious young girl, the shimmering fluid, the first steps, everything seemed too miraculous to be real, but the evidence was there, captured in the astonished eyes of those who had seen it. Reporters arrived at the mansion, cameras flashing, microphones pointed, eager to capture the story firsthand. The billionaire, once private and reserved, now found himself at the center of global attention. People from all over the world were curious, skeptical, and amazed at the same time. Every outlet seemed to want a piece of the story, from news channels to lifestyle blogs, each headline more sensational than the last. Disabled billionaire walks again after mysterious fluid intervention. Miracle or science? Young girl restores mobility to wealthy tycoon. The billionaire, despite the chaos, remained composed, though inside, he was still absorbing the shock of what had happened. Friends, colleagues, and strangers alike sent messages, flowers, and well-wishes, expressing disbelief, admiration, and hope. Some reached out seeking guidance or inspiration, hoping to understand how such a miracle could occur, while others debated whether it was truly supernatural, scientifically explainable, or simply coincidence. Yet in every story, every post, every conversation, one thing was clear. The world was captivated. Everyone wanted to know more about the girl, the fluid, and the moment when the impossible had begun. The billionaire agreed to speak publicly for the first time in years, sitting down with reporters in a carefully arranged interview. His voice, steady but filled with emotion, recounted the events as they had unfolded. He spoke of despair, struggle, and isolation, of the long months confined to a wheelchair, and of the miraculous intervention that had changed everything. viewers and readers were drawn to the sincerity in his words, the raw honesty of someone who had experienced the impossible. Firsthand, it was not just a story of recovery, but a story of hope, courage, and the power of unexpected kindness. The young girl became an overnight sensation, though she shunned fame, preferring to remain humble and quiet. People were fascinated by her calm confidence, her courage to step into a billionaire's world, and the mysterious fluid she carried. Experts and scientists speculated endlessly, some attempting to analyze the liquid, others trying to understand the psychological and emotional impact of belief and trust. The story sparked debates, discussions, and even inspiration campaigns around the world. It became more than a personal miracle, it became a symbol of hope that resonated with millions, a reminder that even the darkest moments could hold light. Meanwhile, the billionaire's life changed in ways he had never expected. Invitations, interviews, and media appearances filled his calendar, but the true transformation was internal. He began to see the world differently, appreciating simple human connections he had once overlooked, valuing courage and kindness above wealth and power. His story encouraged countless others, disabled individuals, and those facing challenges, to believe in the possibility of change, to hold on to hope, and to remain open to the extraordinary. Communities online shared videos and posts about their own experiences with hope and recovery, inspired by the billionaire's story. Memes, hashtags, and discussion forums proliferated, spreading the tale further. People debated whether it was divine intervention, science, or sheer luck, but no one could deny the power of the story. It had moved beyond an individual miracle to become a global phenomenon, capturing hearts and minds, challenging skepticism, and rekindling faith in the possibility of miracles. Even as the world buzzed around him, the billionaire remained grounded, remembering the young girl who had given him the chance to walk again. Her courage, humility, and calm confidence had changed not only his life but the lives of countless others who heard the story. He often reflected that the real miracle wasn't just the fluid or the physical recovery, it was the hope, belief, and human connection that had made it possible. And in every news report, every post, every conversation, people were reminded that sometimes, life could surprise even the richest, most powerful individuals, teaching lessons that no amount of wealth could buy. By the end of the week, the story had reached every corner of the globe, inspiring articles, videos, and conversations across languages and cultures. The billionaire's journey from despair to hope became a beacon, and the mysterious young girl remained a symbol of courage and possibility. The public revelation had transformed a private miracle into a universal story of belief, faith, and the extraordinary power of the human spirit, leaving the world wondering what other impossible things might still be waiting to happen. After the world had witnessed his miraculous recovery, the billionaire began to feel something even more profound than the return of mobility. It wasn't just his body that had been transformed, it was his mind, his heart, and his spirit. For the first time in years, he felt fully alive, not because of wealth or power, but because he had experienced the impossible. The young girl who had appeared unexpectedly with her mysterious fluid had done more than restore his movement. She had reminded him of life itself, fragile, precious, and full of surprises. In the quiet moments of reflection, he realized how much his life had been consumed by ambition, greed, and the pursuit of control. He had built an empire, yes, but in doing so, he had built walls around his heart, isolating himself from genuine human connection. From the endless meetings to luxurious possessions, he had measured success in money and influence, forgetting the joy of simple moments, laughter, friendship, kindness, and the power of giving. Now, having faced despair, helplessness, and fear, he began to see life through a completely new lens. He noticed the subtle things he had once overlooked, the warmth of sunlight on his face, the quiet beauty of a flower in his garden, the comforting presence of those who genuinely cared for him. Each day became a lesson in gratitude. Each movement, each step he took reminded him that life was not a guarantee, that every moment mattered. He found himself smiling at strangers, helping staff and friends without expectation, and appreciating the small gestures of kindness that had once gone unnoticed. The billionaire also felt a deep sense of responsibility. He realized that his fortune and influence could now be used for a higher purpose. Beyond personal gain or status, he could make a real difference in the lives of others. Inspired by the young girl's courage and generosity, he began supporting causes that helped the disabled, the marginalized, and those who had been overlooked by society. His actions were no longer motivated by image or recognition, but by genuine empathy, the desire to give back, and the knowledge that even small acts could create ripples of change. His personal relationships also transformed. Friends and family noticed a new warmth in him, a softness that had been hidden beneath years of ambition and pride. He listened more, judged less, and sought to understand rather than dominate. Conversations were no longer about power or wealth, but about shared experiences, human emotion, and the beauty of connection. He realized that true influence came not from controlling others, but from inspiring, helping, and uplifting them. Spiritually, he began to contemplate the mysteries of life, the fragility of fate, and the meaning of miracles. He no longer took existence for granted, understanding that everything he had once considered permanent, health, strength, freedom, could vanish in an instant. Yet now, having been given a second chance, he approached life with humility, reverence, and a quiet joy that no luxury could provide. He often reflected on the young girl, wondering about the origins of the mysterious fluid and the extraordinary courage it took for her to step into his life. She had shown him that miracles were possible not through magic alone, but through belief, trust, and the willingness to act in the face of uncertainty. Even in business, his approach changed. He became a mentor rather than a ruler, a guide rather than a commander. He invested in people, not just companies, fostering talent and encouraging innovation while prioritizing integrity and compassion. Those who worked with him noticed the shift immediately. He listened more carefully, trusted more fully, and celebrated achievements without jealousy or pride. His empire remained strong, but it was now guided by wisdom, empathy, and the awareness that true success is measured by the positive impact one leaves on the world. The billionaire also took time for himself in ways he had neglected for years, engaging in simple pleasures, long walks in the garden, reading books he had ignored, learning new skills, and even meditating on the extraordinary turn his life had taken. He discovered that happiness was not found in possessions or status but in experiencing life fully, embracing uncertainty, and recognizing the value of every breath. Every day became a reminder that life was a gift, and with every gift came responsibility, joy, and the possibility for transformation. By the end of his personal journey, he was no longer just a billionaire who had been disabled. He had become a man reborn, not only physically but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. He understood that the true miracle wasn't the fluid, the first steps, or even the public attention. It was the awakening within himself, the realization that life's greatest treasures are love, gratitude, empathy, and the courage to embrace the impossible. And in this transformation, he vowed to live fully, love deeply, and inspire endlessly, forever carrying the lesson that miracles often begin not with the world around us, but with the change inside our own hearts. Years had passed since that extraordinary day when a young girl with a mysterious fluid had changed the billionaire's life forever. The world had watched in awe as he regained his mobility, but few truly understood the transformation that had taken place within him. It was no longer just about walking again, it was about the life he had chosen to live after the miracle. He had become a man who measured success not in wealth or power, but in the impact he could have on others. Every action, every decision now carried purpose, guided by the lessons he had learned during those long months of despair. He dedicated himself to helping people who had been overlooked or forgotten, the disabled, the poor, and those struggling to find hope in a world that often seemed indifferent became the focus of his efforts. Foundations were established, programs created, and resources poured into causes that inspired him to give back. The billionaire's influence, once used to dominate markets and control empires, was now channeled into changing lives. One act of courage by a young girl had set off a ripple effect, transforming not only him but countless others. The mansion, once a silent cage, became a hub of activity and hope, filled with laughter, learning, and opportunities for those in need. Yet, despite all the attention, accolades, and media coverage, he remained humble, remembering the girl who had started it all. He never sought fame for himself. He wanted only to honor the gift he had been given. The mysterious fluid and the courage of a stranger had reminded him that true wealth was not measured in dollars or assets but in kindness, empathy, and the power to change lives. He often reflected on the fragility of life, realizing that every day was precious, every moment an opportunity to make a difference, and every human connection invaluable. He also shared his story widely, not to boast, but to inspire, speaking at conferences, participating in interviews, and writing about his experiences. He emphasized hope, resilience, and the extraordinary power of believing in the impossible. The story of his recovery became a symbol, a reminder that miracles could happen when least expected, and that courage, trust, and compassion could create change beyond imagination. Schools, communities, and organizations around the world cited his journey as inspiration, teaching people to see challenges not as endings but as beginnings, not as barriers but as opportunities. Even in his personal life, he embraced a new sense of gratitude, taking time for family, friends, and strangers alike. Simple joys became treasures, and small acts of generosity became daily practices. He learned to listen more, judge less, and value the humanity in every person he met. The billionaire who had once measured life by accomplishments and control now measured it by moments of connection, compassion, and love. And through this shift, he found a joy that no wealth or luxury had ever given him. The young girl who had unknowingly started this transformation remained a quiet presence in his life, a reminder that sometimes, the smallest acts can create the largest changes. He never forgot her courage, her calm confidence, and her willingness to step into a world far beyond her own. She had shown him that miracles often begin in unexpected ways, and that human potential, both to give and to receive, was limitless. Their story became a legend, told not just as a miracle but as a testament to trust, faith, and the extraordinary impact one person could have on another. Looking back, the billionaire realized that the true legacy was not in the empires he had built, but in the lives he touched afterward. The impossible had become possible, but it was the transformation of his heart and mind that mattered most. He had learned that strength is not only physical, that courage is not only bold action, and that wealth is not only measured in money, but in the hope, inspiration, and love we give to the world. And so, every day, he lived with intention, aware that life could change in an instant, aware that miracles were real, and aware that his story was no longer just about him, but about every person who had the courage to believe in the impossible. The billionaire's life had been rewritten, not by chance or wealth, but by trust, compassion, and the extraordinary kindness of a young girl who had reminded the world, and himself, that even the most impossible things could happen. In the end, his legacy was clear: a life transformed, a world inspired, and a truth proven. Miracles often begin with faith, and the impossible is only impossible until someone dares to believe.